Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling something absolutely fundamental to keeping organizations safe online, multi-factor authentication, or MFA.
Right, MFA.
You've heard the term, you probably use it daily, but we're going to unpack why it's so critical. We'll look at the surprisingly clever ways attackers are trying to get around it, explore the different types, and crucially, figure out what you can do to secure applications that weren't, built with modern MFA in mind.
That's right. In a world where, well, password breaches are just rampant, MFA is your primary, often your strongest defense. It's really moved from just a recommendation to an absolute necessity.
Yeah, essential for improving that cyber posture.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we pulled insights from quite a few places. Security Scorecard, CISA, RSA Security, CyberHoot, Edition Financial, Terra Nova Security.
Yeah.
Even some practical discussions over on Reddit.
Okay, good range. So our mission for you today is pretty simple.
Aye.
Cut through the noise, give you the clearest picture of the MFA landscape. We want you to understand the threats, the options available, and, have practical knowledge on how to implement robust MFA across all your applications.
Even those tricky legacy ones.
Especially those. Okay, let's dig in. What's the core idea?
At its heart, MFA is just about layers. It means you need to provide more than one distinct piece of evidence or factor to prove you are who you say you are when logging in.
So not just a password.
Right. Not just something like a password or peon. You also need something you have, like your phone or a physical token, maybe a smart card.
Or something you are.
Or something you are biometrics, like your fingerprint or face scan.
Yeah.
You need at least two of those categories to get in.
And the impact of that simple idea, it's huge, isn't it? I saw some stats about how effective it is.
Oh, phenomenal impact, yeah. One source highlighted that often cited study showing MFA can block over 99.99% of automated account compromise attacks.
Wow, 99.99%.
It's an incredible barrier against attackers just, spraying stolen passwords they found online or trying to brute force accounts.
99.99. That sounds almost perfect.
Yeah.
So, is MFA the silver bullet then? Game over for attackers.
Slight chuckle. Well, if only it were that simple. It's incredibly effective, yes, but definitely not a perfect silver bullet.
Okay.
Determined cyber criminals, they adapt, right? They see this strong defense and they start looking for weaknesses. And often they target the human element or specific flaws in the type of MFA being used.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really important to understand not just that you need MFA, but how attackers are now trying to get around it.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting and, a bit scary. How do the bad guys try to bypass something that blocks 99.99% of attacks? What are the main techniques they're using right now?
Exactly. They've shifted focus. If they can't easily guess the password or beat the second factor directly, they try to trick you, the user, or exploit methods that are just less secure.
Like social engineering.
Social engineering is massive here. Think about phishing emails. They aren't just after your password anymore. They might trick you into approving a login you didn't actually start, hoping you'll just click yes without thinking.
I've heard about that. Just hammering users with notifications until they give in.
That's a specific tactic called MFA fatigue or push bombing. We'll definitely get to that. But first, there's a more sophisticated social engineering technique, the advanced proxy site attack.
Okay.
This one's particularly nasty because it can bypass MFA after you think you've done everything right.
Proxy sites. Okay, walk us through that. How does that work with MFA involved?
It's pretty clever, unfortunately. The attacker sends you a phishing link, you click it, and it takes you to a website that looks exactly like your company's real login page, maybe for email or VPN.
Looks legit, but isn't.
Exactly. It's a fake, a proxy. You put your username and password into this fake site. But here's the trick. The proxy site immediately sends those credentials to the real login server in the background.
So it's acting like a middleman.
Precisely. The real server gets the username and password, thinks it's you, and says, okay, great, now give me your second factor. That prompt gets sent back through the proxy site, which then shows it to you. You see the usual screen asking for your authenticator code or maybe to approve a push notification.
And you enter the code or tap approve on the fake site.
Right, because you think you're interacting with a real service. The proxy site takes that second factor you just gave it and passes along to the real server.
Okay.
The real server verifies the MFA, and boom, you're authenticated on the real service. But here's the critical, kind of terrifying part.
Yeah.
Once the real server authenticates you, it sends back something called a session cookie, or a token. It basically proves you're logged in for that session. The proxy site intercepts and steals that session cookie.
Whoa. So the attacker doesn't even need the password or the MFA factor again.
Correct. They've got the session cookie now. They can take that cookie, put it into their own browser, and they are logged in as you.
Just like that.
It's just like that. The server thinks their browser is your active, already authenticated session. So the big takeaway here is, MFA protects the login, but you have to be sure you're on the real site. Pay attention to those URLs, because attackers can steal your session after you authenticate.
That is incredibly sneaky. Wow. It really underlines that user awareness is just as important as the tech.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about that push bombing or MFA fatigue you mentioned earlier? How does that work?
Yes, MFA fatigue. This one's often less technically complex, but plays purely on, well, human behavior. Annoyance, distraction. So an attacker gets hold of a username and password, maybe from a data breach, maybe phishing. They don't have your second factor, but they know your account uses push notifications on your phone.
Right.
So they just start trying to log in over and over and over. Your phone just starts blowing up with approved login requests. Buzz, buzz, buzz.
Just constant notifications hammering you.
Exactly. The goal is to overwhelm you.
Right.
Or know you so much you just have approve to make it stop. Or maybe you're busy, you're distracted, you don't look closely, and you accidentally approve it out of habit, like muscle memory.
Wow.
And we've seen real breaches happen because of this. It's simple, but it can work. Organizations really need ways to limit the rate of those requests to stop this kind of fatigue attack.
That sounds absolutely maddening, which I guess is the point. Okay, so you mentioned some MFA methods are weaker. SMS for one-time codes got called out specifically in the sources. Why is SMS so bad? I mean, you see it everywhere.
Yeah, it is everywhere, mainly because it's easy to implement from a company's perspective.
Yeah.
But it's fundamentally insecure for authentication purposes.
How so?
Well, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they actually advised against using SMS for MFA way back in 2017.
Really? 2017?
Yep. Yet, lots of places still use it. The basic problem is SMS wasn't built with security in mind. There's no end-to-end encryption, so the messages, including those codes, can potentially be intercepted.
And attackers have specific ways to exploit that.
Oh yeah. Two main ones are SIM swapping and SS7 attacks. With SIM swapping, an attacker gathers some personal info about you, maybe from social media, phishing, leaked data, whatever.
Okay.
Then they contact your mobile phone company, pretending to be you. They'll say, oh, I lost my phone, or my SIM card is damaged. And they convince the carrier to transfer your phone number to a new SIM card, one the attacker controls.
So they basically trick the phone company into giving them control of your phone number.
That's exactly it. They hijack your number. Once they have control, they get all your incoming calls and, crucially, all your SMS messages, including those authentication codes.
Oh, wow.
So now, when they try to log in with your stolen password, the SMS code needed for the second factor gets sent directly to them. Think about the risk for a company if employees use their personal numbers for work MFA.
Yeah, that's a huge vulnerability. Okay, that's terrifyingly simple. What about SS7 attacks? That sounds more technical.
It is more technical. SS7 exploits weaknesses in an older telecom network protocol, Signaling System 7, that connects mobile carriers worldwide. Attackers can leverage flaws in this protocol to intercept or redirect SMS messages and even phone calls programmatically.
So intercepting the codes that way.
Right. It's harder than SIM swapping, needs more expertise, but it achieves the same result. They get the SMS codes. Both of these methods really highlight why relying on SMS for anything sensitive is a significant risk. Organizations really need to be moving away from it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So given how attackers are adapting, it really makes you think, are all these different MFA methods created equal? Probably not.
Definitely not.
Let's dive into that landscape then. The sources seem to rank them from, well, weakest to strongest.
Absolutely. And understanding this spectrum is key if you want to build a genuinely robust security posture. As we just covered, SMS and email temporary codes, they're right there at the bottom rung in terms of security.
Easy to set up, but easy to break.
Pretty much. Highly vulnerable to phishing, SIM swapping, interception, all the things we just talked about.
Okay, so what's generally seen as the next level up from SMS?
Authenticator apps. These are really common now and offer a much better layer of security. You'll typically see two main kinds, TOTP apps and push notification apps.
TOTP, that's like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, Authy.
Right.
The ones with the 6-digit codes that refresh every 30 seconds or so.
Exactly. Time-based one-time password apps. They generate those codes locally on your device using a shared secret key and the current time. It makes the codes themselves virtually impossible to guess or intercept before they expire.
Main risk there is just losing your phone, I guess.
Yeah, losing the device where the codes are generated is the single point of failure for accessing them, but the codes themselves are very secure while they're active.
Okay. And the other type, mobile push notifications from these apps.
Right, mobile push,
Yeah.
super convenient, right? You just get a notification, tap approve on your phone, done.
But vulnerable to that push bombing we talked about.
Exactly. Push notifications without any extra checks, like number matching, are vulnerable to MFA fatigue. You get
Yeah.
bombarded, it's easy to mistap yes.
Okay.
But, and this is a big but, there's a significantly better version, mobile push notifications with number matching.
Number matching, how does that change the game?
It directly tackles push bombing and accidental approvals. When you log in, the system doesn't just send a generic approve push. Instead, it shows a unique number on the screen you're logging in from, like, your computer.
Okay.
The push notification sent to your phone then requires you to actually type that specific number into the Authenticator app to approve the login.
So you can't just blindly tap approve.
Precisely. You have to actively look at the login screen, see the number, and confirm it on your phone. It makes it much, much harder to accidentally approve something or approve a malicious push you didn't initiate. It adds that crucial verification step.
Okay, yeah, that simple addition seems like a huge security boost for push notifications. So what's considered the top tier then? The strongest, most phishing-resistant methods out there?
Right, this is where we get into physical authenticator devices, or hardware tokens. These are things you physically have and interact with.
Like those little USB keys.
Exactly. Things like security keys, often the ones compliant with FIDO2 or WebAuthn standards. YubiKey is a common example. Or even the older style token-based OTP generators like RSA Secured, though FIDO2 is generally seen as the modern standard. In fact, CISA explicitly calls FIDO WebAuthn the gold standard for phishing-resistant MFA.
Okay, gold standard. Why are these physical keys considered so much better, especially against those tricky proxy site attacks?
It's because the secret, the thing that proves it's you, never actually leaves the physical device. With a FIDO2 key, for instance, the authentication uses public key cryptography.
Okay.
When you log in, your browser communicates with the website using a standard protocol. The website basically challenges the key to prove it's the right key for your account on that specific site. The key performs a cryptographic calculation locally on the key itself and sends back a signature.
So you're not typing a code from the key into the website.
Exactly. The key interacts directly and securely with the browser and the real website it's registered with. A fake proxy site can't fool the key into giving up its secret or performing that signature because the key is cryptographically bound to the legitimate website's address, the origin.
Ah.
You need the physical key plugged in or tapped, and it simply won't respond correctly to a phishing site trying to impersonate the real one. So they're inherently resistant to phishing, push bombing, SS7 attacks, SIM swapping. The works, really.
That makes perfect sense. The second factor isn't data you transmit. It's an action performed by a trusted device tied to the legitimate site. Okay, what about biometrics? Fingerprints, face scans. Where do they fit in this hierarchy?
Biometric authentication using unique physical traits like fingerprints, facial recognition, iris scans, or even behavioral things like voice patterns definitely offers a high level of security, and it's often seen as very convenient.
Because it's you.
Right, it's inherently tied to the individual. We see it used a lot in consumer banking apps on phones, and there's talk about using it for things like ATMs in the future.
Feels super secure. But are there potential downsides or vulnerabilities we should know about?
Yeah, the risks are just different from passwords or tokens. A big concern is the security of the stored biometric data. Where is that template kept? How securely is it encrypted? That's critical.
Right.
There's also the potential, though generally complex and targeted, for sophisticated spoofing attempts. Think high-quality deepfakes trying to fool facial recognition, for example. So strong data protection for the stored templates and proper training for any staff handling that data are absolutely essential. But despite these points, people generally like biometrics, especially in banking, because it's easy and feels secure.
Got it. And just quickly, the sources mention security questions. Where do they fall? Probably not high up.
Sigh slightly. Yeah, security questions are, frankly, a very weak form of authentication for anything important.
Too easy to guess.
Way too easy. Answers are often found on social media, public records, you name it. Maybe okay for super low-risk account recovery, but they should never be your primary or even secondary factor for accessing sensitive company systems. Best to avoid them entirely if you can.
Okay, message received, avoid security questions. So we've got this spectrum. Physical keys and biometrics at the strong end, especially against phishing. Authenticator apps with number matching are pretty good. then regular push TOTP, then way down at the bottom, SMS and email codes.
That's a good summary.
But here's the big challenge for so many organizations. What do you actually do about all those applications, especially the older legacy ones that just don't have built-in support for modern MFA? Like they can't talk to a FIDO key or an authenticator app.
Right, and this is a critical, very real-world problem. Not every app, particularly older business systems or maybe specialized software, was designed with Author or SAML or FIDO in mind.
So they're stuck with just passwords. That feels like a huge gap.
It is a huge gap if you leave them unprotected. But the good news, and this was a key point in the sources, is that you absolutely can extend strong, centralized MFA even to these applications.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to rip and replace them.
How's that possible if the app itself doesn't support, say, SSO?
The main solution is to integrate these applications with your organization's central identity and single sign-on system, your SSO platform.
Okay.
Modern Identity and Access Management, or IAM, platforms are designed precisely for this. They act as the central gatekeeper for access. Even if an old app only understands a simple username and password, or maybe some other legacy method, the identity platform can sit in front of it.
So the user logs into the central system first, using strong MFA.
Exactly. Think of the identity platform like a smart gateway or reverse proxy specifically for authentication. When a user tries to get to that old legacy app,
Right.
they get redirected to the SSO identity system first.
Right.
There, they authenticate using whatever strong MFA method the identity platform supports. Could be their physical key, number matching push, biometrics, whatever you've configured.
Okay, so they prove who they are to the central system. Then what?
Once the identity platform verifies the user with strong MFA, it then authenticates to the legacy application on the user's behalf, using the method the old application does understand, often by securely passing the required username and password or token in the background.
Ah, so the user gets the benefit and security of modern centralized MFA, and the legacy app is protected, but the app itself didn't need to be changed.
Precisely. The sources confirm that the technology exists, things like identity brokers, specialized reverse proxies, application gateways, specific connectors that can handle this translation. They bridge the gap between modern secure authentication protocols used by the SSO system and the older, less secure methods the legacy app expects.
That's huge.
It really is.
Oh?
It effectively puts a modern MFA secured front door in front of that vulnerable application. It centralizes your access policies, dramatically strengthens security for systems that couldn't otherwise support strong MFA, and boosts your overall security posture without having to undertake potentially massive and disruptive projects to rewrite or replace those older apps. It's a vital strategy for protecting the whole application portfolio.
That's a really important point for any organization dealing with older tech. Lack of native support isn't a dead end for MFA.
Okay, so beyond picking strong methods and figuring out how to apply them everywhere, including legacy systems, what else should organizations be doing to strengthen their overall MFA game and maybe look ahead?
Yeah, strengthening your posture involves a few key things. First, don't underestimate user training. Make sure employees understand why MFA is important and, critically, how attackers try to fool them.
Like recognizing phishing and push bombing attempts. Exactly. Teach them what to look for, like checking the location or the OS shown in an MFA prompt before they hit approve. Is that login really from you right now? Also, technically, limiting the rate of MFA push requests can directly combat those fatigue attacks.
Makes sense. And passwords. Do they still matter if you have MFA?
They absolutely still matter.
Yeah.
MFA is your main defense against credential theft getting access, but a strong, unique password is still your important first line of defense.
The first hurdle.
Right. If an attacker can't easily guess or phish your password in the first place, they might never even get to the stage of trying MFA bypass techniques. So strong passwords plus strong MFA. And strategically, organizations really should prioritize migrating users and apps away from weaker MFA like SMS towards stronger phishing-resistant options, especially for high-risk users like admins or executives. Think app-based number matching or ideally physical tokens.
Okay. Looking further out now, what about emerging trends? Adaptive authentication sounds interesting, adding more intelligence.
Adaptive or context-aware authentication, yeah, that's a big one. These systems try to make authentication less rigid, more dynamic. They assess the risk of each login attempt in real time based on various factors.
What kind of factors?
Things like, is the user logging in from their usual location, on their usual device? Is it during normal work hours? Does their typing pattern look normal? Based on this context.
It adjusts the security needed.
Precisely. If everything looks normal, usual device, location, time, Maybe just one MFA factor is fine. But if you suddenly try to log in from a different country at 3 a.m. on a brand new device,
Red flag.
right, the system flags that is high risk and might require step-up authentication, maybe ask for a second stronger MFA factor, or even block the login entirely until it's verified another way. Adaptive systems act on the risk context, while context-aware might just log or alert on it. The goal is to balance security and convenience, apply friction only when the risk warrants it.
That's smart. Less annoying for users during normal activity. What about getting rid of passwords altogether? Passwordless is getting a lot of buzz.
Definitely a major trend. Passwordless authentication aims to verify who you are without you ever typing a traditional password.
How?
Using things like biometrics, those FIDO2 hardware tokens we talked about, or newer things called passkeys. Passkeys are designed to be phishing resistant and are usually tied to your device or a credential manager. By eliminating the password itself, you remove the primary target for so many attackers and make phishing much, much harder.
Okay. And I saw mention of decentralized identity, DID, using blockchain. That sounds pretty futuristic.
It is quite cutting edge. The basic idea there is to give users more direct control over their own digital identity using cryptography, often anchored somehow on a distributed ledger like a blockchain.
So less reliance on big central databases holding everyone's identity.
Kind of. It aims to reduce those central points of failure that can be hacked and potentially offer better privacy. By shifting control towards the user and relying on cryptographic proof instead of centrally managed credentials, it also has the potential to make phishing significantly harder. But it's still an evolving area, lots of work happening there.
And one last future-looking thing. Quantum computing. That always sounds like sci-fi, but how does it impact authentication?
Yeah, quantum computers. When they become powerful enough, and that's still a significant win for breaking today's crypto, they could theoretically break some of the math underlying our current security systems. That includes parts of our authentication protocols.
So a future threat to MFA too.
It's a theoretical future threat, yes, but the security community is already actively working on it. Standards bodies like NIST are developing and standardizing new post-quantum cryptography or PQC algorithms. You might see things like FIPS 203, 204, or 205 mentioned. These are new standards for quantum-resistant algorithms.
Planning ahead.
Exactly.
Ah.
The work is ongoing now to make sure that authentication methods we develop today and in the near future will still be secure even if or when large-scale quantum computers become a reality. It's a long-term challenge, but it's being addressed.
Okay, so pulling this all together then, MFA. Clearly an absolute must-have for organizations today. It's that critical defense layer against stolen passwords getting used.
Non-negotiable, really. But, and it's a big but, you have to remember, it's not just set it and forget it. You need to understand that not all MFA is created equal. Attackers are targeting the weaker types, and they are targeting users directly.
So moving towards those phishing-resistant methods like FIDO keys or number matching push is really crucial.
Absolutely. And importantly, knowing that even for those tricky legacy apps, solutions do exist. Integrating them with your central identity and SSO system, using it as that secure gateway or reverse proxy, lets you extend strong MFA across your whole environment.
So you really can secure more than you might think at first glance.
Definitely. The key takeaways really are: look hard at the MFA you're using now, prioritize moving to stronger phishing-resistant options, especially for important accounts and systems, implement those gateway solutions for legacy apps, keep training your users, and definitely keep an eye on where things are heading with adaptive and passwordless tech.
It really feels like securing applications isn't just about checking the MFA-enabled box anymore. It's about understanding this constantly shifting threat landscape and continuously evolving how you manage identity and access.
You know, that raises an interesting final thought. As these authentication methods get more sophisticated, we're talking physical tokens, biometrics, real-time risk assessment, they can technically become more secure, but also maybe less intrusive for the user day-to-day, compared to typing long passwords and fiddly codes.
More secure and easier.
Potentially. Could future authentication tech really make strong security almost frictionless, almost invisible? Or will there always be that inherent tension between needing to rigorously prove you are who you say you are and that universal user desire for just effortless access? It's a balancing act security folks are always working on, but maybe, just maybe, the trends we talked about suggest a future where strong security and user-friendliness aren't mutually exclusive might actually be achievable.